Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of In the Studio. My name is Jason Goldman, and today we're going to be talking about additional gear you can purchase to enhance your music studio. So let's get into it. Spicy For all of you new music people out there just looking for a basic kind of setup, I did a video on that a while back, and you can click the link below and that should take you over to that basic setup. In the basic setup, I really just talked about cheap ways for you to kind of get started. Most of it is USB plug and play, and it's just a very basic setup, but certainly a great setup for you to be able to get up and running and creating music. This video, we're going to talk about additional gear to enhance that basic setup. The first piece of gear that I'm going to recommend you get is the audio interface. If the computer is the brain of your production studio, the audio interface is going to be the heart. Before, we had all these USB components going right into your computer. Now we're going to have microphone cables, and they need to be plugged into something, and that would be your audio interface. The audio interface does a couple of things. The first thing, and most important, is the audio digital conversion, AD conversion. It's converting the analog signal, the regular audio sound that you hear, into a digital version, something that the computer can understand. So if you get a cheaper interface, you're usually going to have less quality on the conversion. So I don't recommend that you skimp out on the audio interfaces. The second thing that it's going to do, most interfaces have what's called preamps. A microphone itself doesn't make a sound. You need a preamp, something to amplify the microphone. And when you get a quality audio interface, they tend to have really good preamps, or at least solid preamps that you can count on. Finally, the audio interface allows you to plug in a variety of microphones, of course using that XLR input as we've spoken about earlier, but also line in instruments, something like a guitar or an analog synth. So these are the advantages of having an audio interface. You can also plug in studio monitors into the back of the audio interface as well, which will allow you to hear your music in a nice full volume setting depending on the monitors that you have. So I strongly recommend that you if you're going to put some money somewhere on an intermediate setup, it's going to be the audio interface first. The audio interface that I have up here on the screen is the Apogee Duet 2, which has only 2 mic inputs. Most quality audio interfaces are going to run around $500-$600 for just 2 mic inputs. Remember, we're getting really good high quality audio digital conversion, especially with an Apogee unit like this. DJs tend to really like this. It's super portable, easy to carry, easy to pack away, and especially if you're on stage, it has one knob for volume, so it's really easy to use. This Apogee interface, as all Apogee interfaces, are extremely easy to use with something like Logic, which is it's already integrated right into the system. So when you're in Logic, when you're on a track, you can literally just dial in the gain on the track as opposed to even having to touch a knob on the interface. So I recommend, really, there's only 2 that I recommend. The one that you see here is the Apogee Duet 2, or maybe something like the Universal Apollo is also a great interface as well. There are certainly cheaper audio interfaces that you can purchase, especially if you're on a budget. Feel free to get something cheaper, but again, you do in this business kind of get what you pay for. The next piece of gear that we're going to be upgrading is going to be our microphone. So before, in our basic setup, we had a USB microphone going into our computer, and now we have a microphone that can go into the audio interface, allowing us a lot more flexibility and many more options to choose from for selecting a microphone. The microphone that I have here on the screen is the Shure SM7B dynamic microphone. It is found in almost every single studio in the world. You've heard amazing recordings recorded on that vocally, like Michael Jackson has done some, Michael Bublé, and countless others have recorded vocals on a Shure SM7B mic. You can record acoustic guitar, horns, pretty much anything with this mic. It's kind of the go-to all-around microphone. There are plenty of other microphone options you can choose from that are cheaper, something like the SM57 or SM58, which are also Shure microphones. Those are fine, and everyone has one in their cabinet. I just feel like for the couple $100 extra, you're going to get a really huge difference in sound quality and a really great mic. So I would recommend you go with the Shure SM7B. Of course, now that we have a microphone, we're going to need a microphone cable as well as a couple of other cables to plug certain things into the audio interface. So like you can see here, I have a mic stand. You can get one for about 20 bucks. Those are cheap. Like a boom stand is probably the easiest and it's probably the most flexible. You're going to need one of those, an XLR cable. You'll also need two cables for your monitors, which we're going to discuss in a minute. They all range. There's always debates on quality cables, blah, blah, blah. You can do tons of research on those. They run anywhere from $25 to $50 a cable, and you will certainly need one for your microphone and, like I said, two for your monitors. The next piece of gear you may want to add to your studio setup is going to be studio monitors. Now, I say that a little reluctantly because if you don't have a good room, like a good listening room, sometimes they could do more damage to your music than actually help. Meaning that if you have a lot of hard surfaces and a lot of corners in your room, the bass is going to be artificially big sounding, and you're going to think you have too much bass, and maybe you don't have bass. And then also there's reflective surfaces in the room that can reflect audio back and forth so that you're hearing things that necessarily aren't in your track. So I'm recommending that you get monitors with the caveat that you really would need some good isolation, or at least having a decent room to use them in. If you're just looking to just hear your music just out in the front, so maybe you could just show some people in your studio, then maybe you'll get a cheaper pair of monitors. But let's say you have a halfway decent room. I'm going to recommend that you go with the Yamaha HS8s. It's going to run you about $700 a pair. These are really great monitors that are modeled off of the old studio monitors, which you see in every studio, called the NS10s. The NS10s were actually quite terrible. And the reason that people like to use them was because you had to work really hard to kind of make them sound good. And the NS10s, you actually had to buy a separate subwoofer in order to get some bass. These upgrades, these HS8s, actually are self-powered, and they actually have some good bass frequency in them. So I think it's a really great monitor to get for that. The last piece of gear that you're going to probably want to upgrade is your MIDI controller. Now, before on the basic setup, I put kind of a very small portable MIDI controller with really bad action. So especially if you're like a piano player, you're going to really hate the action. It's like a sponge almost. This particular MIDI controller that I recommend is called the Novation Impulse, and I have the 61 key. It's semi-weighted, so when you're playing it, it's not like a sponge. It's a little bit more realistic, certainly not like a piano, but certainly more realistic. It's going to run you about $350. There's a wide variety of MIDI controllers. They all basically do the same thing. They control sounds on your computer. I like this one because it also, again, has beat pads, which a lot of people are using today, and I actually like them too when I'm kind of programming a beat sometimes. It has some faders that I don't typically use, but you can certainly set the faders to anything that you want, any of your software. You just need to kind of sync them up. All right, now that we have all this new gear, we have to figure out how all of this pieces together. So here goes the signal flow for the advanced setup. So as you can see at the bottom here, we have our Mac like we had before. The hard drives, like we had in the basic setup, are going to go straight into the computer. And I mentioned this in the basic setup video. If you already have USB-C hard drives, which is what all new Macs have, you can plug those directly into the computer. If you had older ones like USB 3.0, you're going to need the dongles in order to plug them into the USB-C ports. The MIDI controller will also still be going into the computer via USB. All you need to do is plug that straight into the computer, and you should be fine. Our new audio interface is going to go directly into the computer, this one via USB 3.0. So again, you'll need the dongle if you have a brand new Mac, which has USB-C. Once you plug in that audio interface, you're going to want to plug in the monitors, and the cable that you're going to need for them is an XLR to a 1/4 inch, which is different. And I recommend you get balanced cables for that. Again, XLR to 1/4 inch is what you're going to need for your monitors. Now we have our headphones going into our audio interface as opposed to our computer like we did in the basic setup. So now you will need a 1/4 inch adapter to your 1/8 inch, because most headphones just have an 1/8 inch, but some of them have 1/4. Either way, you're going to need a 1/4 inch to go directly into the Duet. Finally, you're going to plug your microphone into a cable and then into one of the inputs in your Duet. They say one of them says input 1, one of them says input 2, and either one is fine for right now. And that is how our advanced signal flow is going to look. All right, guys, let's do a quick recap. So we talked about purchasing an audio interface. Over here, again, we have the Apogee Duet 2. It has 2 mic inputs, and I have this down for $600. We also spoke about upgrading your microphone to a Shure SM7B dynamic microphone, which will run you roughly $400. Don't forget you're going to need a mic cable and a mic stand, as well as a couple of monitor cables. So you should really be having, again, 1 mic stand, 1 microphone cable, and 2 monitor cables. Next, we talked about upgrading your monitors, and I have down here the HS8s, which are studio monitors, $700 a pair. And lastly, we talked about upgrading the MIDI controller, which is the Novation Impulse 61, which is what I have. I have the 61, but like I said, you can certainly get more or less keys, and I have that down for $350. If you're looking for some additional pro gear to enhance this particular system, you can watch the third video I made, which is the pro gear setup and signal flow. That will be something you'll want to check out, as it will show you some of the things that you will find in current studios and even in some of the smaller studios with just a couple of enhancements of some major gear. Hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comments. Look forward to talking to you soon. Peace.
Spicy Keys.